have an exciting show for you talking all about whether the First Amendment still exists anymore for really anyone, the average person or a national cable news reporter or network news reporter. Don't forget, journalism is not doing super well right now. And thankfully, there are still sponsors that are out there willing to support shows like this one, where we bring on the most censored people on the internet. One of them is Bonner Wine. They've been with me from the beginning. They never tell me who I can talk to or what I can drink, really, for that matter. They don't even care if I drink their wine. They're still willing to show up and support the show. If you go to AllisonWinePromo.com, you get my favorite Malbecs from Argentina. These are high altitude, nay, extremist altitude wines from Argentina, from very remote regions. They are from 6,000 to 9,000 feet, hand-picked grapes, small family farms. Get it for the grandma that's not talking to you anymore after you unfriended her on Facebook over whatever fake news you saw recently this year. AllisonWinePromo.com. Okay, let's bring in my co-host here. We got Bill Doris, ex-TV Newsy as well. And Bill, today we're going to be breaking down this breaking news about how a judge has held Catherine Herridge in contempt for refusing to reveal her sources. Now, quick background, I actually used to work in the same newsroom as Catherine Herridge when I was a weenie, tiny nobody, which I still pretty much am, but at least I have a few years under me at this point, intern at Fox News Channel. Catherine was the military defense reporter there, and she was very well connected in the upper echelons, I would say, of intelligence information. And so I tend to believe the narrative, at least, that she has information that some very powerful people want to see. I don't think that's necessarily a show. The rest of what's going on behind the scenes, I can't attest to. I can just tell you that she is very well connected in a world where I think secrets, people want to keep secrets. That's the first thing I'm going to say. Now, what we learned today is, I'll just read the beginning of this article from CNN, that a federal judge has held veteran journalist Catherine Herridge, this is from yesterday, contempt of court, fining her $800 a day for refusing to divulge her sources for a series of stories published in 2017 while she was a correspondent at Fox News. Herridge, who has aggressively fought the case, is expected to appeal the judge's decision. The case would have sweeping First Amendment implications for journalists and news organizations across the country. For some reason, the news organizations like CNN actually care about the First Amendment in this particular case. Not totally sure why. Didn't think they cared about it anymore. But moving on, Herridge, who left Fox News in 2019 and was recently laid off by CBS News, which we're going to talk about in a second after we get through this, refused in September to disclose the sources used for her stories, defying a court order issued earlier in the year by U.S. District Court for the District of Columbia. Judge Christopher Cooper came as a result of a lawsuit filed by Chinese-American scientist Yangping Chen against the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Herridge had reported that Chen was the subject of an investigation by the FBI. Chen, who was never charged, has alleged that federal authorities improperly leaked information about her, violating the Privacy Act. In an effort to prove her case, Chen subpoenaed Herridge and Fox News with the hope of unmasking the reporting sources. Fox News and Herridge aggressively fought the move, arguing that Cooper should quash the subpoenas because of First Amendment protections afforded to the press. Cooper disagreed and said that Chen's need for requested evidence overcomes Herridge's qualified First Amendment privilege in this case, and then wrote, "The court does not reach this result lightly. It recognizes the paramount importance of a free press in our society and the critical role that confidential sources play in the work of investigative journalists like Herridge, yet the court also has its own role to play in upholding the law and safeguarding judicial authority." So before I give my hot take, I'm going to turn it over to Bill and see what his initial thoughts are. Bill, please.
My initial thoughts, and I'm going to save my hot take for when we go to the subscribers only, as we always do here on Tittle Tattle. But my first thought is there's no way this is going to stand, especially when there's more conservative judges on the Supreme Court, because this is where this is going to go eventually. And no one can deny that. But the fact that CNN is getting behind this, it almost makes me take a pause. But obviously there's a long.
Let me break in real fast. Do you think if she had only been like at Fox News Channel and hadn't switched over to, say, CBS, for instance, that they would still be as concerned about it? You know, maybe because she switched out of Fox, that they're like, maybe we care now.
Well, I mean, but maybe so, but that's also not very fair, because if this was an MSNBC correspondent, would the Trump administration 4 years ago done this kind of investigation, I mean, I'm not ready to have that conversation, to be honest with you,
Yeah,
because
I understand. I always
yeah,
just wonder about it. Like, if
yeah,
they feel like you're on their team, they tend
yeah,
to care about your
exactly.
rights more. That's just the point I'm trying to make here. It's like
Right, right, right.
there were so many people whose First Amendment rights have been violated over the last several years, especially. But when one of their teammates, then it's like,
Mhm.
oh, you know, and I don't know
Well,
if they even look at each other as teammates because you know how Brian Stelter said everybody should put their selfies up when they got their vaccines at Fox. Anyway, I won't go down that route. Please continue, Al.
well, but give us a little more context. What was this all about, Allison? Because she had, the classified information that was leaked.
Mhm.
So break it down for the in lay terms.
Okay, well, basically, I have not read the lawsuit in its entirety.
Mm,
So, what I understand from the reporting that I have read about it is that this scientist essentially feels like uh there was something nefarious happening behind the scenes with leaked information from a federal source
mhm.
and was never charged with a crime or anything. And okay, let's put ourselves in this person's shoes for an
Right,
instance. And we had somebody report and it went national or global that, we were under investigation, but we were never charged with a crime. And we want to sue to say, hey, this isn't fair. Now, I mean, I could put myself in that person's shoes and see that person's perspective. On the other
yeah,
hand, and I don't, like I said, I don't know what's really going on behind the scenes. Even from what I read, I don't even know what to trust. But there's a lot of
right.
stuff missing in this too. But from what I understand, this particular person, this scientist, wants to clear her name. In order
Mhm,
to do that, wants to know who the source is that revealed some kind of information that, again, this person was never charged with any crime for. And
mhm.
Herridge has said, no, I'm not going to hand over the source because I have a First Amendment right. And so this judge, for whatever reason, believes that the scientist's right to see the information trumps Catherine Herridge's right to protect the source. That's
Right.
how I understand this case to be.
Yeah. And uh, the history shows whether it's a uh, conservative administration, whether it's a liberal administration, whether it's a Supreme Court that you agree with their views or not agree with their views. History shows that in these type of rulings, the First Amendment is always going to win. Journalists must have the right to keep their sources secret. We have so many examples of where 90% of the whistleblowers and the reporters are protected, and the 10% that are exposed become martyrs or they become heroes or champions of a particular cause. So I'm not ready to say that we're going to change the narrative here. I don't think we're going to come up with, Catherine Herridge. I feel like there's so many other things going on right now in the world that this is important, especially to people like myself and Allison, that it's important to protect the First Amendment. And this is a battle that's going to be fought. But we have so many other things on our plate right now that I think it's going to get maybe pushed back a little bit to the back burner. But also at the same time, I think I would lay my money on the heavy favorite. That's just me.
Well, I think that,
Or the historical favorite. Let me put it that way.
yeah, I I I I think that the First Amendment is in a very sensitive position right now. As somebody who was fired, I believe in violation of my First Amendment rights.
Mhm.
I I don't think that right now the First Amendment is something that you can trust will be there for you when times get tough. I just
Mhm.
I think it's one of those things. I hate to say this because it kind of sad to say, but it really is circumstantial at this point. What judge you get, what district you're in, who you're
Yeah.
fighting against, who's in charge at the time, what the political tenor is at the time, what the media thinks about your case. I mean, all these things determine whether your First Amendment rights, I think, will be upheld.
Mhm.
And not because the First Amendment is that complicated, though I think there probably are more complications to it than we necessarily allow for in our public discourse. However, I do think it's just not something you can assume you have, like, all these rights to fall back on that will be there for you no matter what, because you'll just go to court and say, I had a First Amendment right. And they'll look at the Constitution and say, oh, yeah, hot damn, you're right. The Constitution protects your right to free speech. It just, the Constitution at this point, sad to say, or I guess it always has been, only as firm as the government that enforces it. And if the government is trampling itself all over the Constitution and not following the Constitution, then do you think it's gonna protect your rights if it benefits them to not do so? And we have the most insanely dense bureaucratic government trampling all over people's rights at this point. Funny, Bill and I might have to do an episode next week about how MSNBC just wrote this insane. They they were live on TV doing, really, it was a mind-boggling segment about how this
Oh
University of
God.
Maryland professor wrote a book called, how it was like white rural rage, and it's all about how the greatest threat to democracy right now is white rural rage, not the government itself. So
Yeah.
the farmers in America right now are, I mean, it's just really an interesting thing. Anyway, we'll do a whole separate thing on that, but it's just to say that that's how a lot of people look at our rights right now. They think the government is somehow protecting, and that we are the threat to the Constitution, when in fact the judicial system, the federal government, our politicians, like the system itself, to me, is the greatest threat to our country and freedom as we know it. And so I would agree with them that, like, for instance, I probably would agree with a lot of reporters who are writing this headline, because a lot of people are covering it right now. I would agree with them that the First Amendment is, in a very tangibly precarious position. But I would disagree with them probably about, like, who is the real greatest threat to our constitutional republic. And I think that's where we break down on, looking at these particular headlines. Before we move on to the next part of Herridge's story, which we were going to cover until this news broke, if this green shoe could get out of my way and I could show you, is that CBS News, after backlash, finally returned Herridge's files because, well, Bill, we could debate this, I guess. I'm not sure what you think about it. They were saying that it was just common protocol. She was fired. She was investigating the Hunter Biden laptop stuff. And so then she gets fired, and they seize a bunch of her stuff, like her notes and everything, not just like her computer, which would be very common, but like files and whatnot. And they're like, this is just common practice. And then even SAG-AFTRA actually stuck up for her, which makes me wonder, like, SAG-AFTRA rarely, I mean, just my personal experience, they didn't necessarily have your back if it was going to put them in a precarious situation with management. So it's just interesting, like, why they felt safe enough to get involved in this one, or why they felt like they were going to fight for it. But before we get into the story, I guess I have one quick question for you, Bill. And that is, what do you think about, like, let's just play devil's advocate here. Say, okay, we're journalists. So let's put I don't want to call the scientist a devil necessarily, but I'm just saying, like, let's put ourselves in this person's shoe. Because a lot of people, especially conservatives, who feel like there's a lot of reporting that just say sources say, and then it like completely runs amok, and they don't say who their sources are. And I've heard conservatives complain about this, that the media is like constantly just going on like sources say, and they never say who their sources are, and they write these crazy stories, and it causes all kinds of problems. And they should have to say who they heard it from. But then when it comes to somebody they like, they'll be like, hey, you shouldn't have to reveal your source. Because if you're on the opposite side of the defamation, you want to know who said that about you. So what do you think about that? I mean, just say you could write the law. Do you think the First Amendment should extend past a defamation suit? In other words, if you're a reporter, and how do you even define reporter? Should you be protected at all costs, even at the risk of, like, your reporting and refusal to hand over that information causes potentially global conflict?
Okay, stay on camera, because I want to see your reaction when I say this. So you and I, we have very differing opinions about what is the definition of a journalist. We've had that conversation multiple times. Now, we've not had that as a debate, but you and I don't think we necessarily 100% agree on what is the definition of a journalist, but that's okay. And that's a conversation for another time. But I feel that in this particular case, when you have someone that is clearly a journalist and is not willing to reveal their sources, again, this is not, it's nothing new and it's not rocket surgery. This is the First Amendment, and I feel it completely and totally applies. So I mean, now as far as the things that are seized, that becomes oh gosh, as somebody who ran a newsroom, I can tell you that uh, if I were in a position where I had to terminate you or ask you to go find other employment for any reason, I need to seize the things that you own, or not you own, but the things that you have that we've issued to you, whether it's a laptop, a hard drive, etc. So I get that. But at the same time, if somebody's made copies, you can't sit there and say, okay, I need your laptop, your hard drive, but I can't take your personal phone that you've copied all these files onto. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of a double-edged sword because, like, you sign a contract basically saying that everything you do on the job is property of the employer. On the other hand, it seems kind of shady that sounds like they fired her when she wasn't
Mm.
at work. So they didn't tell
Mhm.
her in person.
Mhm.
She was home and then she couldn't
Right.
retrieve her stuff. So they took all her stuff. And that does seem kind of shady. It seems a little shady. You didn't tell her. I mean, I've had coworkers that were fired. They were brought into an office. They were told that they're donezo and they had a second with HR to go to their desk and
Right.
clean out their material and leave. And
Mhm.
so I think that they did that tells us something. Did they do anything illegal? Uh, Probably not, because you sign a
Mhm.
contract with these people. It's like you dance with the devil, you sometimes you get burned and they make you sign contracts that basically you sign over your freedom to them and they own pretty much everything. And so I think what they did was shady. I think it was purposeful and intentional. I think she has some
Yeah.
information that somebody's trying to protect. Do I think they probably had a right to do it? Yeah, probably, considering the contracts I've seen and I've signed. I mean, they could tell me what I could do with my hair, much less some kind of files. Now,
Me too.
yeah, exactly. Now, like, I was thinking first, well, maybe she should be taking her stuff home so she didn't have to worry about that. But I mean, somebody like her, she's probably got to have gazillions of files. Like, to take all of her files home every day would probably be totally unrealistic. Okay, real fast. Let me tell everybody about a brand new sponsor, TeleRx. TeleRx is an online pharmacy, 20% off with promo code Allison. How did I get connected with TeleRx? Because I do almost all natural stuff. Here's why. 5 weeks ago, I was stung by a wasp and my whole entire hand swelled up during a live stream. You guys probably remember that. Well, this Tuesday, I was supposed to do another live stream. I got stung by another wasp. This time, my entire body swelled up, and now I have to carry an EpiPen with me so that I don't go into anaphylactic shock and die in front of my kids. I am mega dosing with vitamin C. I will say that, but I don't have the luxury as a mom who stays at home with two young kids to just have respiratory failure. So anyway, I got an EpiPen. When I originally was prescribed my EpiPen, I waited 30 minutes in line at my local pharmacy, which was, I think, a Walgreens. And I finally left because I had my two kids and they were freaking out. And I decided I would rather just, I guess, pass out than wait in this line any longer. So I left the EpiPen there. The second time I attempted another pharmacy to get my EpiPen, they were going to charge me $500. I could not afford that. I left the EpiPen at the counter. So I had no EpiPen. I got connected to TeleRx. They sell the EpiPen for half the cost. How do they do that? They have cut all the bureaucracy. They go direct to consumer. They take away all of the medical censorship we've seen over the last few years. If you're somebody who has an emergency need, for instance, like me, you go direct with their doctor and it all happens like with a minute of hours, really. And I got my EpiPen within a couple of days. It was much more affordable. And like I said, you get 20% off anyway with promo code Allison. they are trying to address the situation that many of you all have witnessed over the last few years, which is hospital bureaucracy, government bureaucracy, big tech bureaucracy getting in the middle of patient doctor relationships. So go check them out and let me know what you think. Brand new sponsor again, TelyRx, TELYRX.com, 20% off with promo code Allison. All right, so Bill, I am going to say one last thing. We'll cut the video for supporters only. And don't forget, everybody, you can send me a letter. I love to hear from people. Send me your encouragement. Send me your private files. I'd love to see them. I won't seize them from you. P.O. Box 3355, Denellen, Florida 34432. Just nothing creepy, okay? Whatever's in your personal files, make sure there's nothing really creepy. Hey, if you have Catherine Herridge's personal files, send them to me in the mail, and I'll send them back to her. P.O. Box 3355, Denellen, Florida 34432. What does Bill have?
This is a flash drive that a lot of people in South Central Kentucky would love to see.